Hi everyone, my name is Isaiah. I'm a Power BI developer and I would like to walk you through a very interesting topic today. And the topic is called the storage mode in Power BI. I'm so sure that you are going to enjoy it and you'll be impacted in one way or the other. So let's get started. So let's talk about storage mode. Storage mode refers to as the different method of establishing a connection to your data sources and determine whether the data is cached in memory for our reports. Basically, what we are saying is that there are different sources in which you want to bring in your data into Power BI. And then you need to determine the best source that will best fit your data in order to ensure that your report performs better. In other words, storage mode has to do with getting the data from the source down to the model or to your report. In storage mode, there are basically three things to put in mind or to consider. The first one has to do with the query performance. The second has to do with the data size. And the third has to do with real-time data expectation. When we talk about query performance, we are saying that how well do you want your report to respond to the data, or how fast do you want your report to respond to the data that is being loaded into it. When we talk about the data size, basically, we are referring to how large and how small the data size is. When we talk about real-time data expectation, what we are saying is that how often do you want the updated data to reflect in your report? These are the things you need to put in mind before determining which storage mode you need to use for your report. In Power BI, there are basically three important storage modes, although some had said it's four, but I'm going to limit our discussion to these three. The first one is the import mode. The second is DirectQuery mode. And the third is the dual mode. So we are going to delve into each of these modes separately, and I'm going to show you a practical example of how this works. And at the same time also, I'm going to show you best practice that I've come across in my own experience in the workplace. So let's talk about the import mode. Now, import mode is usually common everywhere, and it has to do with importing small data sizes from various sources into Power BI. So what Power BI does when you use this is that it keeps the data in its memory called the vertical ng. And because Power BI kept its data in its memory, this particular mode of data storage helps for performance, and also you can easily have access to the data offline. So this mode is best when you want your report to perform faster and when you think that you may need to work offline on your report. Examples of files for this mode has to do with an Excel file, either XML or CSV file, SQL Server from small to medium data sets. So what I'm saying is that data sets that are not too big or too large, and you want to bring them into your to Power BI reports. We have SharePoint lists for non-live dashboard. We also have web data from API or website. But it's important to know that if you are bringing in your data from web data from API or website, you may not need to refresh them live. And other examples of sources is also Oracle database. Now let's talk about the advantages and the limitation of the import mode. Like I said before, and I will say again, when it comes to fast performance, import mode is just the best. So it's best recommend it's best recommended when you want your report to perform faster. Another thing also we must note about this mode is that it supports advanced transformation and complex model. In this mode also, you have full Power BI feature set available, which means that all the features in Power BI are readily available for you to use. And like I said, you can also work offline once the data is imported. However, there are limitations. Limitation in the sense that large model consume more memory. So if you are building large model with the import mode, it will definitely consume a lot of memory. Storage and size constraint. Large data sets consume a lot of memory. And this sometimes, if your import mode data set is big, it may really affect how your Power BI perform. Another limitation is you have a limited schedule refresh. However, also, this is also based on the Power BI license, the license you have on your on the Power BI version you purchased. Then the last one is also that the data is not real time, which means that the data is not frequently up to date itself. So it may require you to refresh the data before you see the updated report on the basis of the data that you have. Now, let's delve into the practical aspects and let's see how this works. So I'm going to show us a file now, an Excel file. So let me show us the Excel file now. So I'm going to stop this and I will open this folder. So let's open this file. Now, this is an Excel file and let's see how we will import this file into Power BI using the import mode. So I'm going to close this file and I'm going to switch to my my Power BI environment. So this is my Power BI environment. So I'm going to click on blank report. Now that I am in my Power BI environment, let's import the data into Power BI and let's see how the import mode works. So in the Power BI environment, my Power BI desktop, I'm going to click on what get data and I'm going to click on what Excel workbook. Now, why am I clicking on Excel workbook? Because the file I want to import is an Excel file. So if you have other files like CSV, you can just click on the file format. But I will click on Excel workbook. Then I'll have to specify the source where the data is. The data is in my videos, and I put it in a folder called Power BI. So let me go back to my videos. Okay, it's in this folder, PB file. So I'll open the folder, select the file, and click what? Open. So when I click open, so I can then take the data just to preview the data. So I have a preview of my data here. I can then click on what? Transform data. So when I click on transform data, this will take my data to Power Query environment so that I can do the necessary transformation I want to do. So I click on transform data. Clicking on transform data, the data is loading and the data is fully loaded. So you can see, I can just preview. And the next thing I need to do is just to load the data. So I can just change the name here. I can call it my sales fat. And then I will click enter. The data set has been renamed. I can then click close and apply so that it will load into Power BI desktop. So when I click close and apply, the data then loads itself into Power BI desktop. The data has been successfully loaded into Power BI desktop. However, I can't see the data because I am in my report view. So to see the data, I can click on the table view and then click on the data set. So this is the data. The data has been successfully loaded into Power BI desktop. Now, with this data loaded, I can perform all the necessary things I want to do, run my analysis, perform my DAX. All functionalities is basically available to me in this mode. Now, let me also show you how we can use the import mode when we are importing our data from SQL. So I'm going to open my SQL. Then I can connect to a database which I've created here, and then just select the data, run a select statement, AW sales, and execute. So this is the data set. Now, how do I also import this data into Power BI desktop using my import mode? So what I need to do is I'm going to come to Power BI desktop again. Then I'll click on my report view. Just click on get data. This time around, since I'm bringing the data from what? SQL Server, I will just click on what? SQL Server. When I click on SQL Server, it's asking me for the server name and the database option. Also, if you notice, I also have another option here, the data connectivity mode, which here I will select my what? My import mode. However, I'm going to need my server name, so I'll go back to SQL Server. I'll go back to SQL Server. So I need to get my server name so I can disconnect this and connect it back just to copy my server name. This is my server name. I can connect now since I've copied it. Mind you, I have a database called HIIT_cohorts, and I have the data inside. So I can then go back to my Power BI environment. Then I need to type in my server name here. So I can just paste it here. Then I have the database. My database is HIIT_cohorts. Then I need to specify the connectivity mode. Mind you, please note that we are talking about this storage mode. So we need to ensure that we select the import mode here. So when I click on import mode and I click OK, it automatically connects to the database, and I have all the tables in the database. The name of the table I want to import is AWC. So I can just click on it and then click on transform data. When I click on transform data, it takes me again to Power Query environment. I have my data here. Everything looks good. Now, if I want to rename it, I can just rename it again. Let me call it SafeFat2. Now, the beauty about the import mode is that this data is being kept in Power Query in the vertical engine, and I can then work with it even when I'm disconnected with the server. So I can then click close and apply. Data is loading, and you can see that the data has been loaded. To see the data loaded again, I can just click on what? My table view, and click on what? The name of the table, which is SafeFat2, and I will see the data also loaded. Now, with this, I have all functionalities in Power BI available for me with this mode. So that's basically just about the what? About the import mode. So the next mode, which we will talk about, has to do with the direct query mode. So I'm going to go back to my slide again and explain. So let me go back to the slide again. And we have the words, the direct query mode. So when we talk about the direct query mode, we are saying that you want to connect directly to the data source, and the data remain in the source. In this mode, the data is not being kept into Power Query or into the vertical engine. The data is being kept in the source. So whatever you do as regards to your report is being picked from the source. Now, it is important for us to know that the direct query mode is best suited for large data sets when loading data into memory. So it's best suited for what? For large data sets. And examples of files for the data query, for the direct query mode, we have Azure SQL database or Azure Synapse Analytics. So that means that you are dealing with large set of data set from Azure. We have SAP HANA, Snowflake, Google Query, SQL Server for real-time reporting needs. I need to also lay emphasis on that. So when you want your data to be real-time, also direct query mode is also best recommended for it. And you must note that because the data is being picked from the source, the direct query mode ensures data security and governance. So which means that your data is secure. Your data is secure. So for data security and for governance, and you want to ensure that every data is being kept at the source for security purpose, one of the things you also need to take note is that direct query mode is best used. However, while the direct query mode has some advantages such as the real-time or near real-time data, it also comes with some disadvantages. And I'm going to also explain those limitations. Limitations such as there is a high performance reliance on the what? On the source. So the direct query mode, because it's picking from the source, your data solely relied from where it's being picked from. And which also leads to the second limitation that has to do with no offline access. That means that if the server is down from the source, or if the source is not available, the data will definitely not be available. So report requires a live connection to the data source at all time. At all time. And because it's so much dependent on the data source, you must have also a very strong network, high network dependencies, which means that your frequent query will definitely increase the bandwidth usage and latency. So if any of your network had issues, you will also experience issue when trying to load in your data using the direct query mode. And I'll say again, when we talk about security and data governance, then you need to think about keeping your data sets in the direct query mode. So let's see how this works in the practical aspects. So I'm going to go back to our Power Query, and we are going to also load the data from SQL Server using the direct query mode. So I'm going to my to my Power BI. So I'm going to load another data here. So I'm going to click my report view and click on Get Data. This time I'll click on SQL Server. Then I'm going to connect my data here, and I'm going to select the direct query mode, and I will click OK. But before I click OK, let me just type in my database as usual, HIIT cohort, and I'm going to select the direct query and I click OK. When I click OK, I'll select the same data set and I'll click Transform Data. When I click Transform Data, I can rename the data as usual by calling it Sales FAT3, and I will click Close and Apply. So when I click Close and Apply, the data is loading. You can see this. You can see the warning coming out, potential security risk. When you add a second data source, information from one data source might be included in query that are sent to the other source. Only add another source if you trust the owner and admin with the data. Do you want to view this model? I'm going to click OK. So when I click OK, the data is loading, Once the data is loaded, I have the data here. Now, let's try and preview it. If I click on my table view, I have my sales file table, the first two data sets which I imported using the import mode. Now, if I now click on this, look at what happened. If I click on this, you can see the table cannot be shown because it is not in import mode. Now, the reason why I could not have access to the table here is because the data is directly picking from the source. So whatever I'm doing on the data set on sales file 3, which I loaded using the DirectQuery mode, the data is definitely picking from the source. So there are sort of limitations on what I can do with the data. Even when it comes to using some DAX function or some DAX complex formula, I will definitely encounter some limitations because I used the direct query mode. Unlike the import mode, where the data is being kept, in Power BI, the direct query mode does not give me that privilege. All data, all what I will do as regards to the data is being picked from the source. Now, I'm going to stop here today and we'll continue in the next class. We'll talk about the dual or composite mode, and I'll also explain to us best practice of when we can use all these modes and also how we can switch from one mode to the other. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I also hope to see you next time. Thank you and stay blessed.